GG's in this bitch, man. What y'all on, man? 6 on? 6 on? 6 on? What's up with y'all, man? I know what's going on. We're in this bitch.
I feel like someone put something upon my house or me or something. Like, I just don't feel like I don't do this.
This is 32-year-old Tiffany Lucas. Just 2 hours ago, police found her unconscious on the street while her 2 sons lay shot and barely alive inside her home.
Fired at least 3 seconds.
So where the fuck was she at?
See, but 4. Yeah, it looks like both of them had several. One had a double pack.
Investigators
She killed them.
initially assumed it was a home invasion, but things took a dark turn as strange reports from neighbors began to surface, along with a past husband's unsolved murder and a dangerously paranoid mother at the center of the dark turn as strange reports from neighbors began to surface, along with a past...
Okay, I had to look at that. This nigga look like Swoozy, boy. If y'all know who Swoozy, bro, this nigga, he's a YouTuber, bro. That nigga been on it. Just look him up, fool. Shout out to bro.
Husband's unsolved murder and a dangerously paranoid mother at the center of the tragedy. It was around 11 a.m. on Wednesday when Shepherdsville Dispatch received a call from a distressed neighbor. 911, where's your emergency?
My neighbor just came up to my door and just passed out, and I can't get her to wake up. She just started screaming that her kids are dying. 502-689. She is coming in and out of consciousness. She's laying in my driveway right now. I'm with her.
Who's that was screaming?
Her.
Okay, what's your
My
name?
husband is going in there. My name is Sarah.
What are you on? Dispatcher Goods, what is your emergency?
Hello? My wife on the phone with the kids. I just went there to her neighbor's house to get you and the bed. He's all bloody.
There's a kid on the bed all bloody?
Yeah, in my neighbor's house. She told us that he's okay, he's breathing. You okay?
So, 233.
It's okay. You okay? Oh no, he's pretty sick. There's one out of the bed and yeah. There's 2 of them. They're both here. They're breathing.
There's 2 children.
Imagine being able to build an app with...
Imagine trying to... Bro. Why the fuck is you just coming over there and just laying down? I feel... Bro. She probably killed him, came outside and then failed. Like, oh my god. What? Like, what? That's the story. I don't care. That's a story. Can't tell me. Can't tell me.
With the situation sounding chaotic and extremely dire,
Y'all laptops and shit be looking like mine and shit.
police and EMS units were immediately dispatched to the area, not realizing the horrific scene awaiting them inside the house.
What y'all doing with this?
Inside the home, first responders found 2 boys, 6-year-old Maurice and 9-year-old Jaden, both critically wounded, struggling to breathe after suffering multiple gunshots.
Did we see alcohol hasn't been seen yet?
What the fuck? Multiple gunshots. Both these little young kids, bro. Damn.
There we go. This there's a dog right here. Yeah, he was saying that the whole time. at least 3 that I can see, but 4.
Yeah, it looks like both of them had one had a dump pad.
Okay.
The one I had only seen one looked like it went in the back on the front.
Okay, well, she's got, there's 4 shots for sure that I can see. It's all right. Come here, it's okay. It's okay. Come here. It's okay, Bob. It's okay. It's everything okay.
The bedroom was in complete disarray, with trash.
The fucking dog just came out, like, the dog fucking seen that shit, heard the shit, that was fucking hiding from the goddamn. Word.
Clothing scattered everywhere. On the blood-stained sheets, police found...
Nobody's supposed to live like this. Why the fuck is all these clothes? Oh.
4 shell casings, indicating the children were likely shot while sleeping. Officers also discovered a gun hidden beneath the pillows and no evidence pointing to a break-in or a home invasion. Naturally, suspicion quickly shifted towards the children's mother, 32-year-old Tiffany.
That look like some fine shit. But watch who you put your thing in, because girls be looking like fine, some little decent shit whole time to do shit like, you know what I'm saying, like, fool. This be sick.
Lucas. It was Tiffany herself who indirectly triggered the 911 call, wandering over to a neighbor's home and collapsing in their front yard. Given the strange circumstances, officers detained Tiffany just outside the house, finding her semi-unconscious and soaked in her own urine.
Conscious. She's conscious still. 1, 2, 3. Have you taken anything? Have you been drinking? Then why don't you stand up? You don't feel like it, huh?
I don't feel right.
Don't feel right? Okay.
Pretty quickly, the officer noticed something unsettling about Tiffany's demeanor. She appeared agitated yet strangely detached, an unusual reaction from a mother whose children were nearly just killed minutes earlier. As Tiffany was placed into the back of a police cruiser, detectives arrived and began questioning neighbors, searching for anything that might explain what happened. That's when a man stepped forward, claiming he spoke with Tiffany the night before and noticed something very strange the detectives needed to hear.
So, guessing maybe it was about 3:15, 3 o'clock-ish, can't tell you exactly. And sitting in the garage, just hanging out, having tea, and then I see the shadow, because my truck had parked usually on the right side of the driveway. Nobody knew who was there, but I couldn't see because he was in the way. And she came from the side of my truck. She's like, hello. And I'm like, hey, you know, I'm literally like, hey, what's going on? She's like, can I borrow your phone? My phone's not working. And I said, absolutely. And she said, I just need my neighbors. And she's like, well, I need to use your phone. I said, okay. I can tell you the number. She called 2 numbers from my phone. No, none of the numbers seemed like answered, but she then handed me my phone back. So then she said, thank you. Turned around, started walking away, and I'm like, stopped. Right at the end of my driveway, and looked up. Literally, like, looked up in the sky. Maybe on what I said, I don't know. And it just went sat in her yard. And me and Nikki looked at each other. I said, Nikki, good needed to go over there and talk to her. I kind of let the lady, try to see if the ladies could handle that situation, or like, female. So, she said, okay, but I thought something was off. I felt like something was clearly off.
The neighbor's observations pointed detectives towards 2 possibilities. Either Tiffany had suffered a psychotic episode and attacked her children, or someone connected to the unknown number she...
I ain't worried about no motherfucking episode, no, fuck. You know what the fuck you doing, bro. You know, and niggas really be like really mental, like really sick, you feel me? I don't even know how, bro. Like, niggas be born with it, but that doesn't fucking make you fucking an episode on making kill your kid, bro. They don't make you kill nobody else. They don't take life and shit with it. Like, you know what I'm saying? What the fuck?
Called had influenced her into committing it. The latter possibility would soon reveal itself as a twisted version of the truth. But for now, it was becoming clear that Tiffany was involved in the shooting and something had pushed her to do it. Shortly after arriving at the police station, Tiffany was scanned with a metal detector, and it was then that the neighbors' concerns began to manifest in Tiffany's behavior.
She got,
I shot myself in the head.
You what?
Shot myself in my ear.
You shot yourself in here. What's your... I don't see anything. There's nothing there. Okay.
Following Tiffany's unexpected statement, medics examined her but found no injuries. Certainly not a gunshot wound. At this point, detectives had no doubt Tiffany was the shooter. The lack of forced entry, neighbors describing her strange and erratic behavior, and, most telling, her implied confession, claiming she tried to shoot herself with the very same weapon. All investigators needed now was a clear confession, a motive, and whether anyone else played a role. So before beginning the interview, detectives looked deeper into Tiffany's background and discovered interesting details. Tiffany was a business owner in 2016, only to go bankrupt a year later. She also lost custody of her children in 2018 due to drug use. But most troubling of all, her husband was the victim of a homicide in 2019 and the killer was never caught. With this information in mind, the officer prepared Tiffany for an interview. However, extracting an admission from her would soon become the least of their concerns. But before we continue, sometimes the most devastating injury...
Oh, we got that Morgan and Morgan. That's that money, boy. They done dropped that bag on you, didn't they, my nigga?
With that said, let's get back to the investigation.
Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Alright. Sit up. You alright? Sit up.
What's going on? What's going on?
Sit up. Sit still. Take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath for me in your nose and out your mouth. Good? Alright. Take a deep breath. I want you to fall over again.
Stop.
Stop. This.
I'm watching you on camera. Move your fingers. Several times. Yeah.
Move my fingers now.
Every time. Go. Keep moving them. Stop.
You mean changing my hand position?
Yeah.
That's just me.
No, you're doing it. Don't do that. Yeah. Yeah, you are. I'm watching.
So what is that doing for you?
It's not right. Stop.
It's not right.
You.
How is it not right?
Look at it. It's on camera.
I'm in the camera. I'm in the camera.
Okay.
Okay.
See?
I don't sit still.
Yeah. Every time.
Yeah, she sound guilty as fuck. Yeah, she did it.
Come on, some of that crap in your fingers.
I move. That's what I do. I don't sit
To
still.
every sound you move, to every footstep that you hear, you move your fingers.
I'm not an idle person. I don't move around.
So you walk to other people's footsteps. Because that's what you're doing. You're walking to everyone else's. How do you know that?
I don't know what.
Other people's steps.
Because I hear them out there.
By now, Tiffany's behavior was becoming increasingly odd. She was paranoid and disturbingly indifferent towards her hospitalized children, not once even asking about their condition. But as the detective entered the interview room, he had no idea just how unhinged and bizarre her behavior was about to get.
See, since you walked in. Why are you doing that? As soon as you open the door? That's weird, right? It's weird. As soon as people walk, sounds, that's not right. Excuse me?
Let me shut this.
It's not right. See? Every time I say something, your phone's going off.
Believe me, I wish it wasn't going off. Well, I'm going to talk to that woman about what happened earlier.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? I mean, where are you from?
I know I'm crazy, but I'm not. So I know I look crazy, but I'm not crazy.
I don't think you look crazy. I'm just trying to... if I'm going to talk to someone, I'd rather know who they are. You know, I can tell you a little bit about me.
I love the children.
You tell me a little bit about you. Okay?
I love the children.
Damn, man.
I love them really so much. I want to hurt them, but I just feel like I didn't. I felt bad, and I didn't.
You killed your kids, bitch.
And I wasn't like focusing how I was supposed to, you know. And they get their video games and the YouTube and the kids. It just messes their minds up. So where people can manipulate.
Theirs or yours?
Or do whatever they want. And I feel like someone put something upon my house or me or something. Like, I just don't feel right. I'm not, like I said, I don't do it.
I don't give no fuck what the fuck the situation is, man. Your kids, you, bro. Like, look like they was twins. I guess they was born the same year. Both the same little young and shit. Something that's not supposed to happen is a parent bearing their kids. It's supposed to be the other way. For you to, the reason why your kids are dead and you're still alive right now, sitting on that shit, fool. You know what I'm saying? Motherfuckers don't even put the kids on foster care no more. They just kill the kids now. Both is I feel like that, like, damn, fool.
You said something about PlayStation games or something?
Yeah.
What about it?
It's like those games manipulate the children, you know, the YouTube and just, haven't you ever heard anything like that before?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I really feel like it is manipulating for children, and they get into the children's homes, and, you know, break the family stuff. That's what I feel.
I mean, you could be right.
I am right.
Yeah.
And I know I'm right. And you do too. You do.
I mean,
You just know.
the stuff that's on the internet that you have access to now is...
It's terrible for the kids. They
That's
need
why I
to
had to do
stop.
that.
My kids are beautiful angels, you know?
Tiffany's bizarre claims of mind control and paranoia towards technology was a sign that there might be deeper, more disturbing motives behind the shooting. The detective was quickly realizing he was dealing with someone whose mental state was deteriorating by the minute. He needed to find a way to extract an admission from Tiffany and uncover the real reason behind the attack before things got even more unpredictable. But before he could press further, Tiffany unexpectedly introduced another person into the story, someone she insisted was directly responsible for what had happened.
Were they misbehaving earlier? No?
They're perfect.
Do you know what happened to them today? Can you talk to me about that?
I just did. Just did.
Well, you said something about the PlayStation and YouTube and all that, which makes sense and understand.
My house, I feel like someone tried to manipulate me through my phone, you know, manipulate me through my house.
She's a grown-ass woman.
What are they doing to you?
Manipulating my mind. Parker Borders. His name is Parker Borders.
What about him?
he lives in Bodycam, and I'm pretty sure he's been manipulating my mind for like 3 years.
Really?
Through my phone, putting up things in my house, like real evil, dark, weird stuff, like trying to
get you to do things?
yeah, like alter my mind, like completely like flip me, like I'm a woman of God, I don't do that. Well, you don't hurt your children, you protect them, and I feel like I have to protect my children.
Right.
I would never do something like this unless someone manipulated me.
So do you think Parker actually manipulated you into hurting your kids? Think so? Yeah.
Tiffany's claims about Parker Borders immediately raised red flags for the detective. Extreme psychological manipulation isn't unheard.
If they feel like, bro, if they go start finding for bro because of what the fuck she said, it's dumb as fuck, bro. These are your fucking kids. How can anybody else manipulate you to kill your own kids? This shit has not been like fuck.
Individuals have indeed been driven into horrific acts through isolation and emotional pressure. But whether Tiffany was truly a victim, an expert manipulator, or highly delusional remains to be seen. When pressed for more details, Tiffany began revealing disturbingly specific information about Parker Borders.
Who is this Parker guy to you? Just a friend, or?
Like a Tony Jenny type thing. Like it was portrayed out of revenge or something like that.
Right.
Before I had a friend who was with him, and she was seriously passed away in a car wreck. And then now, in my house, you'll see there's like things like my car is gonna get blown up, all these weird little, like how stuff is all set up for me, you know, in my house like that. So I just feel uncomfortable, I don't know. I feel like it's him, it's not me, it's not me. I'm right with God, so I know it's not me. Not in my mind.
Yeah.
It's not me.
Did he provide you with a firearm, with a gun?
Yes, it was his.
So that gun that was, I guess, in the house and the bedroom or whatever, that's his gun?
Yes.
Why did he give it to you?
I don't know.
How long ago did he give it to you? You remember? Like years, months, days, when?
I don't know.
Don't remember?
Been a while.
Been a while? What do you remember him telling you in your mind to do or persuading you to do?
It's happened once before. Like, I got like a weird feeling, like it felt weird. And then here recently it just felt weird. I'm not like, I'm a good mom. Like, I'm a really good woman. I'm a good mother, you know? I have veneers and everything.
I'm sorry?
I said I have veneers and everything. I don't look like this.
Okay.
Although the detective already knew that Tiffany was most certainly the one who pulled the trigger, her vivid claims that Parker Borders had supplied her with the gun and orchestrated the shooting couldn't be dismissed. With this in mind, the detective adjusted his approach, deciding
This bitch is just talking. You feel me? She already called. She just don't want somebody else to go down with the shit with her. If you think you not gonna get no time for you pulling the trigger of your kids gang, you dumb as hell, just go ahead and drop that shit out the way. You probably talking about your plug or some shit, talking about you said I was a sugar daddy.
to take her story at face value. If Tiffany truly was manipulated, she should have no problem admitting, at the very least, that she fired the gun. However, Tiffany had other thoughts in her mind.
Do you remember hurting your sons today? I'm not saying it's you.
Not me.
It's not you.
It's not. I know it's not me. I would never hurt my children.
Right. He's influencing you.
Manipulating.
Manipulating is the best word.
Through the phones. Wi-Fi, all of that.
And once he manipulated you and pushed you into doing this, do you remember firing a weapon at him today? I mean, you remember that, right? No? I mean, you're being manipulated, as you said. I understand that. But physically, you're the one who pulled the trigger, even though that's not you. Somebody else is pushing you to do that or manipulating you to do that. You pulled the trigger on the weapon. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Fred? How did your sons get shot?
I don't know.
You don't know.
There's no word. I don't think I was supposed to.
But do you think it was an accident today? Or did you mean...
Trying to make me hide.
Because if you think about it,
She's making it hard in this motherfucker.
really, there were only, if you think about it, there were only, I guess, two ways of explanation of something like that. That it's an accident, you didn't want to hurt him, you didn't mean to hurt him. Or you're the bad mom who wants to hurt him. Sorry, it's too late, I'm wrong. I don't think you're the bad mom that wanted to hurt him. So you think it was, which one? Do you think it was an accident that you hurt him today? I know it's a rough question, but I gotta ask, you know. I would hope so.
No, just keep up.
Take a minute, alright? Get your breath.
I don't want to talk anymore. I have nothing else to say.
Okay.
Even though she initially denied pulling the trigger, Tiffany eventually admitted that the shooting was an accident. Following her admission, Tiffany refused to talk further, leaving investigators uncertain about her true motive behind the shooting and if her claims about Parker Borders were real or just illusions. Fingerprint analysis revealed only Tiffany's prints on the weapon, confirming that she was the sole handler and directly implicating her in the crime. Additionally, police found no evidence supporting the existence of Parker Borders or the friend allegedly killed in a car accident, leading detectives to conclude both were likely constructs of Tiffany's mind. After her arrest, Tiffany said she had struggled with opioid addiction for nearly 10 years, starting after she was prescribed painkillers for dental work. As her condition worsened, she turned to fentanyl and became increasingly paranoid, convinced that she and her children were being watched and targeted by a human trafficking ring. Detectives later learned she had been off drugs for 10 days, likely worsening her hallucinations. Believing she was protecting her children, she shot both.
That was her leaving after her just killing her kids, bro.
Detectives later
She knew what the fuck just happened.
learned she had been off drugs for
Dog even looking at you.
10 days, likely worsening her hallucinations. Believing she was protecting her children, she shot both sons, then tried to shoot herself, but the gun had jammed, which explains her earlier claim of being shot during a metal scan. As for her children, despite the medics' best efforts, Jaden and Maurice would tragically pass away from their injuries. Additionally, Tiffany was never linked to her husband's murder, and it remains unsolved to this day. On November 22nd, 2024, she pleaded guilty to killing her 2 children. She received 2 consecutive life sentences and will be eligible for parole in 2043.